So we're discussing about the main issue of identity, and again, joining me today is Brother Ali Najaf. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having
Well,
me.
you know, there is a big issue, and I'm sure those viewers at home know that there is this whole talk about third culture kids. And third culture kids essentially are a lot of the British Muslims, and I'm sure that American Muslims, or Muslims growing up in the West, what they are being called now. They have another culture, and their parents' culture, and then they have the culture which they're living in, and essentially they're becoming third culture kids because they're amalgamating both cultures. And sometimes, whilst it does complement, there's a lot of contradictions. And when you're a Muslim child, you have a fourth culture as well, because you've got your British, your Pakistani, or your Khoja culture with you, or your Arab culture, and then on top of that, you've got this layer of being a Muslim Shia.
Yeah.
So we're in a bit of a
mix.
yeah. So we've got like a beautiful mess, shall we say?
Yeah, it is a nice mess.
It's how you consolidate all of those things together. I think
Yeah.
that's what we're going to be discussing today. So if you've got any sort of opinions on this issue, do you think you're in an identity crisis? Do you feel like this is a real important issue to you? And if so, what's your personal experience with identity? We want to hear from you. Feel free to contact us either on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, or the usual old way of sending in an email. And if you're really feeling adventurous, you can write to us, but I'm sure there will only be a small minority. But
Might not even reach you.
I'm sure there is someone with
Does
a pen
that
and
even
paper.
work these days?
Well, I think there's some
so.
value in pen and paper, don't you think?
That's true. There's value in pen and paper.
There's something about having like an old book.
I guess if you're gonna become a classic, you should just get a pigeon and send it through.
Yeah.
That would work.
A pigeon, or you could be like a dove, a white dove.
A white
It'd be
dove.
symbolic.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
symbolic.
That'd be nice.
But I think when you have an old book and you've written, like, I don't know, as much as these things are nice.
Yeah.
That feeling which you get from an old
Honestly,
book.
for me, I still love to sit at night. Like you dim the lights, you sit with a cup of coffee, you've got your book in your hands. Perfect.
But I've got to say, like, now these electronic books, Kindles and everything, I'm a bit of a technology snob when it comes to this. I like having it, and especially
yeah.
But there is something about holding a book.
I like to have a book because I like to mark it up. Yeah, if I have a book, I'm like taking, annotating it and doing all that, and just
because it's a
flipping
bit hard,
and bending. Yeah, exactly. So it's nice when you get that.
No, most definitely. And
Yeah.
actually, that's a very interesting point to start on, because as you can see, times are changing so quickly.
Yeah.
I grew up with books, and my little brother's now growing up with an electronic tablet he takes to school, and it's got all of his work on it.
Yeah.
Things are changing very rapidly, and sometimes we're not up to date with that pace, and the pace of life is very fast. So how do we bring some sort of peace to this chaos?
Well, it's hard because I think I grew up in a time where something like an old-fashioned computer, like the old ones, are something that people don't even remember today.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not that old. I don't want to make it seem like I'm that old. I'm not. But it just shows you how fast we're moving. I mean, within spans of 5 years, 10 years, we're making huge advancements. So, I guess in one way, you would like to assimilate the things which make sense. You want to assimilate the things which are good, things which are positive, specifically things like technology. Although some would argue, specifically those who are in AI fields of philosophy.
What's AI?
So, artificial intelligence field of technology.
I've seen that film.
Which one?
Artificial intelligence.
I haven't seen that one, but the recent one that came out was Transcendence.
Yes.
Which was talking about taking the mind of a human and putting it in a kind of in a computer and letting the computer live. And at the end, obviously, the conclusion they came to was humans are much more than just wired computers, their emotions, their thoughts, their feelings. I guess that debate happens, whether humans are mind or mind and body or just mind. But anyway, one idea that technology controls us. And at a point, there are things we can assimilate to, and things obviously that we refrain from and try to keep our identity. So, but I guess the question would come is what is this? Like, what is this identity that we're talking about? Is it a Muslim identity? Is it a human identity? And I would argue that on a top level, there is a human identity that exists, and then there is a religious identity and these other identities that we have.
And so when we're talking about identity, is there such thing as a Muslim identity? Because we're hearing it a lot, especially in the news right now. and you read any kind of government policy documents about the Muslim community, they're like the Muslim youth, and they identify straight away. You know, he has this identity, and he's so closely linked to his maternal lands, and he's angry, he's furious, he's emotive. And when you look at Shia youth, he's 10 times that, because he's emotive, because his religion is also telling him emotions are good. So where do we come in this term of what is a Muslim identity?
So, I mean, I like the point that you made about this idea of I've got my identity and you've got your identity. And the problem with that is that it can separate us. Identity can actually at times separate us. Where I become so close-knit to my identity, which is not a bad thing, it starts imposing on other people's identities, meaning I have the right identity and you have the wrong identity. Let me show you to the identity that I have. Some people have this mentality. Obviously, others accept religion. They take it as their identity, and they don't force it upon people, nor do they put people down who have a different identity. But at times, it can be so screwed into our heads, the idea of you're a Muslim, this is your identity, this is who you are, that a person becomes dogmatic in the way he is and can't see past the lights of his identity. Not realizing that other people, for example, a young man who's born in India, who's given Hindu food and is influenced by Hindu culture and Hindu religion, will have his own identity based on where he is. This geographical identical difference is not a problem. It happens. It's similar to political geographical identity and all these things. But if there's something that actually binds us all together, it's the identity of us being human. At the end of the day, even Imam Ali alayhi salam says, if a person is not your brother in humanity, or a brother in faith, which is how we are linked together in many ways, now we see the world in majority, people aren't my brother in faith. There's only 1.6 billion Muslims, and the rest are non-Muslims. So for the majority of the world, there's no link in my identity of being a Muslim. The link there is in humanity. So when I sit next to a Christian, I'm not looking at him as a Christian, I'm looking at him as a human. And even within two people of faith, I mean, there aren't two Shias which are exactly alike. There aren't two Sunnis exactly alike. There aren't two whatever. I mean, even within religion, people are so different. So you get to ask yourself, is there a greater level of identity that we might not be focusing on?
Doesn't the Islamic culture comes about and it says, you know what, we're here to foster a Muslim identity. It's all about unity, and it's trying to grab people in, and it's trying to tell people, you know what, you need to have a firm way of looking. Look, the way that Muslim men are, we're told to have the beard, or the women are supposed to be clearly identified with the hijab, etc. So these are very visual representations of identity and the manifestations of that identity. So there is quite an Islamic, wouldn't you agree, an Islamic thing of you should have some sort of pride and identity in the way that you present yourself and your faith.
Well, I agree with you. I think Islam does say that you should identify yourself. I mean, there is even a time in the Prophet's time where the men were told that if your beards were a specific color, where the Jews would dye their beard white, you should dye your beard a different color. Because what happened at the time was there was a political system in place, not to be against the Jews. Of course, there's nothing degrading here, but what we're saying is there was a specific time where the Muslims needed to simply identify themselves. Because they were fighting a political system which was corrupt, and that's where they needed to show themselves. Today, we're not fighting anyone. There's no one to fight, and there's no one to tell others that, hey, you know, we're over here, see us, because we're here. People understand. Obviously, Islam does say foster that religious identity, because at the end of the day, religion provides a community for people. Religion provides a firm connection where people can come together, stay together. It's only a problem when you become dogmatic and prideful, and you all of a sudden start thinking that my identity is better than someone else's.
We have quite a big problem here, don't we? Because what you're seeing within, and I just want to play on that whole idea of pride. Did Islam promote division in the sense of culture? Because now what we're seeing in the community is people are dividing themselves on the basis of culture because of various practices. It's just convenient for them. But when that becomes kind of, you know, institutionalized, or it becomes more kind of very, very, at times discriminatory, then what's our responsibility in
Well,
terms of identity?
you're hitting on a huge issue. You're hitting on an issue that turns many people off from religion. And that's the issue of me believing my identity is the best identity and everybody else's identity is wrong. And empathy plays a huge role here, because you will know, and people know through science and psychology, that where a person lives and where he's from plays a huge impact on the person's personality. I mean, for example, if I was born to a white Christian family, which some people might look at me and think, you know, if I was born to a white white Christian family, I would most likely be Christian. If for example, you were born to a let's say a Chinese family or whatever, people.
So look,
No, you do not look Chinese. But you know, a family who's let's say for example Shinto,
yeah.
or a family who's for example Buddhist, then you would most likely adopt that lifestyle due to the social circumstances. So sometimes people don't realize that as much as there's a difference in identity, I can understand why other people are the way they are. And there's a verse in the Quran which is powerful, which hints to this. God says, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakari wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'ban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu, inna akramakum 'inda Allahi atqakum. Realize how he says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people.
Yes, that's very interesting.
He never says,
O
oh believers, oh Muslims, oh. He's like, look, God from his, look at the point of view God's looking at it. He's like, I'm looking at it from a high perspective, looking at everyone down. I've created you, I've put you where you are, and I realize there's cultural differences. It's up to you to come and work together, not to divide. Never let, unfortunately, we have so many times where our identities divide us. For example, if nationalism divides us, that's a bad identity. If something like having a political understanding divides us, that's a bad.
Can nationalism be a force for good in Islam?
I personally, what I would say is nationalism on a top level is very dangerous, because people have a pride. I think nationalism mixed with justice, yes, but pure nationalism, where I simply care for a place just because it's where I'm from, where I have an emotional attachment, has caused many wars in history. Now, does that mean the concept is bad?
Yeah.
No, because nationalism doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Same way religion doesn't exist in a vacuum. Does that mean the concept is bad? It's not. But if misused, it can be misrepresented. And if used properly, I mean, I know many people in the world today who fight for their justice of their land because they've been invaded and attacked. And that's something that's wrong. I mean, just take a look at the Palestine example. You've got a group of people who were occupied. It's one of the biggest open-air prisons in the world.
Yeah.
And nationalism might be a driving force, but you've got justice that's there. So like anything, it can be used, it can be misused. I don't want to generalize.
Not so much so that it kind of, because this is a problem when we come from cultures which are from either the subcontinent or from the Arab, Middle Eastern societies. We intertwine culture with religion.
Yes.
Our cultural practices are mixed with religion.
Yes.
For example, when it comes to the issue of marriage, when it comes to these various other things which are actually sometimes religiously contradicting.
Very.
For example, people can't marry from certain castes in the South Asian community, or likewise in certain Arab communities from certain cities you're not allowed.
Yeah.
So these certain things which are seen as culture because we're taught religion from our parents.
Yeah.
We see these as kind of, so how can we kind of separate essentially where our culture is and where religion is?
Well, I think it all goes back to rational thinking. If you sit and rationally think about something and say, this doesn't make sense to me, then that is typically something that's not part of religion. If you can look at another human being and say, I will not marry you because you are a different denomination of a specific sect, or you're a different denomination of culture, or for example, you're darker skinned or lighter skinned, that means there's an innate issue with the way that I am. The problem that's happening here is we've got a outer culture which is influencing our inner culture. The outer culture is people telling us that if someone is not as light-skinned, they're not as beautiful. If a person weighs this way, they're not beautiful. If a person is from this culture, they're not beautiful. If they have this religion, they're bad. If they have this religion, they're good. We are spoon-fed things which make us, really give us a prejudice or a judgment on things. And I think we need to come to things with a more open heart, where I can sit and say, you know what, I need to differentiate what's Islam and what's not Islam. There are so many examples of these things. Something that comes to mind that I think is important is the way we look at other people and their religions. It's interesting, Muslims in the world today say that if only the world knew Islam, it would be such a great world. But you'd ask the same Muslim, is there room for a Christian in your religion? No. Only Muslims are right, everybody else is wrong. Is there room for an atheist? No, the atheists, they're not good people, they're bad people. God says we're going to burn them. Is there room for a human being who's got an issue, for example, a psychological issue? Is there room for these people? You know, and some even have the crazier notion that when Imam Mahdi comes, he's going to butcher all these people. I mean, the very man whose grandfather came as a mercy to mankind is going to now come and doom and damn people. Where do these ideologies come from? It stems from an innate pride in identity.
Pride is a very, it's you could argue is the original sin, essentially.
Essentially, it's the original sin where a shaitan is brought down from heaven for it. Yeah, you make an excellent point.
But pride, essentially, back then, it was based on identity as well, because he identifies that I'm made from fire, you're made from clay.
Yeah.
So why should I? And what kind of things can we take away from those past lessons? Because we have numerous incidents in this, for example, in the life of the Prophet, where people have shown pride, and the Prophet has told them like to come away from this element of.
Sure.
But why is pride always looked down upon?
So let me kind of give this example. In the time of the Prophet, the Muslim community would identify with something. Would identify with a specific lifestyle. Obviously, that lifestyle was no drinking alcohol, no womanizing, not doing any of these things. But the Prophet was still open in dealing with people who might have not had that identity because he knew he should work with them. So, for example, a man would come to the Prophet and say to him, Ya Rasulullah, I want to commit adultery. Adultery was not the identity of a Muslim. But the Prophet would not doom him, damn him, or condemn him. But he would say, look, let's go for a walk and discuss it. And he very beautifully discusses it. People felt comfortable coming to the Prophet and saying, Ya Rasulullah, I drink alcohol. One man says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm having this issue with my wife. One man says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm having this problem. They would come and open to him about everything. People were he created such a loving, a system where there's no prejudice, no judgment. No, I'm going to look down on you because you think differently than me or you have a different lifestyle. No, none of that. But a very open heart where even though I have my identity as a Muslim, I can still work with you and say, well, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Why are things the way that they are with you? And then you slowly start moving forward.
Well, let's look at the Muslim community now. Amongst young people, it's very important. At the same time, there's a lot of negativity if identity is so overpowering that it casts a shadow of ignorance in front of your eyes and your world perspective and the way that you look at things. You start analyzing them from this ignorant perspective. Sure. However, identity is a very important part of fostering confidence, but also a feeling of belonging. Like you feel like you're part of something.
Yeah, of
and Islam is a religion as it's a community
religion. Exactly.
It asks for communal worship, the benefits of praying together, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So what are the benefits for us to start looking at this Muslim identity more kind of how we should be developing it now?
So let me give this example. There's a point in history where the Muslim identity was known for its powerful forward movement.
Okay.
At one point, the Muslim identity was known as a golden age, where if you were a Muslim, you were labeled with this identity of moving forward, and you were bringing ideas about arithmetic and chemistry. And for example, when the Muslims came into Spain, they created the first bathhouses that Spain had ever known.
Yep.
I mean, they moved it forward when it came to libraries. The Muslims at one point had such an identity of strength and education and forward movement. That identity was a phenomenal identity. And the question, I guess, that we ask today is, where have we come from that identity? What kind of identity do we show the world today? And how are we changing that perception? Because unless there is an educated group of Muslims coming forward and trying to work on the Muslim identity, we will always get the mishaps of people coming up and misrepresenting us. I mean, just look at the whole ISIS issue, and people, some people coming forward and saying, well, ISIS represents Islam. How? How does that represent the Muslims? How is that even an identity for us? Impossible. So I guess what I would say is a sense of identity is powerful when you have something powerful to identify by. But I mean, if anything, where have we come from scientific discoveries as Muslims? The issue here is not with religion. Again, like we stated in a previous episode, the issue here is with how we view religion and how we decide to move forward with it.
And so how do we move forward with it? That's the question.
I mean, it depends. My personal belief is education is key to moving forward in religion. Unless people are educated, and I'm not just talking about religious education, I'm talking about economic, political, because people ask this question, where is Islam's political system? Where is Islam's economic system? Where is Islam's set social system?
Social system, yeah.
These things don't exist within their brawn and structure framework. They only exist within their principles. That's why you have some scholars like Shahid al-Sadr who came out and wrote books called Our Economics, Our Philosophy, Our This, Our That. Why? Because it's up to the Muslim community to come up with the best solutions for their problems. God is not going to give you a structured political system from 2,000 years ago and say, well, you know what? Use this till the end of time. I say, well, hold on, God. We might change. Our political demands might be different. So what do I do when it changes? God says, no, use the same one. No. God is saying, I'm giving you the principles as a community.
Yeah, because you have the kind of utopian Medina structure there, which is it kind of is based on equality, and you see the justice, the social justice, which is embedded within the
principles.
society.
Mind you, the principles are everlasting.
Most definitely.
But the actual practical application can change from time to time. I mean, just look at how much change has happened in the past 1,400 years ago. So because that change has happened, then we come and say, well, as an educated group of people, we come together and say, okay, we have issues in our society. What are the best solutions? Let me give just this example.
Go ahead.
Which is in Florida, they did a study trying to figure out how to get rid of homelessness. I mean, what do we do about, because as you know, homelessness is very expensive. It's about $35,000 per homeless person. This comes out of taxpayer pocket, and obviously you're paying hospital expenses when they get hurt, lodging. Then the cops have to come and take them and put them into prison, feed them, etc., etc. That's a whole different discussion. How do we solve it? So the government realized, and these people are realizing now, that the best way is to give them homes, and that would cut spending by half, so they would cost less housing a homeless person than to actually leave them on the street.
It's really interesting that even the way that's approached just shows you where our society is right now. The fact that the reason why it becomes an issue to address, even in the UK, the issue of homelessness is the reason why it's on the government's agenda is the fact that it's costing the state so much. It's not on the basis of humanitarianism. It's on the basis of capitalism.
Agreed. It's interesting that you say that, because it's not that, oh, we feel bad for them. Oh, this is just costing us too much. We need to get rid of this headache. Nonetheless, the outcome is a positive outcome.
Yeah, most definitely.
Now, these weren't Muslims who did the study. This isn't a Muslim study, but the results are as Muslim as can be.
Yeah.
Right? So there are people out there who are non-Muslims who are coming to more Muslim results than the Muslims themselves. Why is that? Because Islam is not only a system whereby, God gives you the law and you apply it. That's one aspect to it. Islam is also about ingenuity, being innovative in solutions. And we find that there are some non-Muslim countries which, for example, give their people health care. They take care of people who are in need. There is a system of health. There is a system of this. People are given basic human rights. These are Muslim qualities that every society wishes for.
The fact that, like, for example, in the UK, we can practice and have our majalis in the most ample security without fear for our lives.
Yes.
Whereas you go to Muslim countries and people are restricted or they're given threats. And so sometimes we see those Muslim values more kind of manifest within this society.
That's very true.
Which brings me on to a very good point to follow on to. What can we take from the Western society? What values can we take today which would help us in practicing our faith?
I think there's a lot. Specifically, there is a lot of corruption today, whether it's political corruption or whatever you want to call it. But the original people who started these countries were able to bring about some interesting qualities, and specifically overcoming one's own prejudice, focusing on what's important. Things such as professionalism, helping other people. Again, I'm going to go back and say education, because that's huge. Within the American system, half of the PhDs in America are on the H-1 visa. They even import people into the country.
Yeah, brain drain from those countries.
Yeah, exactly. Bring them into the country just so that they can study and bring about the research. I mean, isn't the technological advances that America has seen and Europe has seen, these are huge, these are vast. I mean, within the past 100 years, we have discovered about 50% of scientific discoveries. Look at a field like genetics. Genetics was never known. This is only 50 years ago. And every year the books are changing because they're finding out new things. Now imagine the possibility in this. Islam at one point was known as the religion of ingenuity, the religion of discoveries. Jabir ibn Hayyan was Muslim. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, highly regarded Islamic philosopher, scholar, and religious authority, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, which we take our madhab.
We've not done his personality justice, especially in Western academia. There's not too much written about Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, as much as should be done.
Very true. I mean, I know there's some professors, non-Muslim professors, who do research and history work based on Ja'far al-Sadiq, and sometimes our own people are not as interested. So it's just safe to say that there is a lot that we can take from the West, positive lessons that we can learn. Obviously, there's a lot to learn from West and East, but in general, we try to take the positives and we move those.
So my final question for you today is, we've looked at West and East. Now let's go 1400 years back, and let's go to this event. What can we take in terms of identity? What is the message of Imam al-Hussein for us in terms of how can we implement that when we're looking at fostering a British or an American Muslim identity? Sure. What can we take from that?
So I mean, let me just say something about this specific incident. Something that's nice about Imam Hussein is there's a goal, and that goal is to end oppression. But the means to that goal is wide open, in the sense that Imam had Christians with him, Muslims with him. John was a Christian, Wahab was a Christian. So in Imam's movement, the idea of religion was not a barrier, rather it brought us together. And it allowed us to fight oppression together. It's funny because today we see the most oppression happens because people are fighting each other about religion. It happens. It's not the fault of religion, but it's the fault of a human dogma. It's the fault of poverty. It's the fault of people who are confused about life, people who are oppressed. And these things cause, to religious wars, etc., etc. But what we're saying is we need to come together, religions in general. It doesn't matter, you can have your identity, but let's come together and fight a main goal, and that is oppression. Imam is showing us that the most basic identity is humanity. So he says in one of his quotes, he says, "I would rather die a free man than live as a slave." And he's saying there's a human freedom element that exists that I will die for, that I'm willing to sacrifice my life and my whole family for, and that's a human aspect that to me, and that's why I think he transcends time, he transcends everything. Non-Muslims can benefit from him, Muslims can benefit from him. He's just a universal figure. Everything about him is so universal.
Brother Ali Najaf, thank you ever so much for your time.
It's my pleasure.
And
thank you.
That is all we have time for today. And as you can see, the discussion around identity is something which is extremely vast, and it will have a lot of opinions. These are a lot of opinions which we've been sharing with you. So what have you been thinking about this issue of identity? Do let us know, write into us, or also engage with us on social media. Most importantly, in these days when we're looking at the identity of Aba Abdullah and how we can take benefits from Sayyidah Zainab and Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, let's reflect on how far we've come and how near we are to the Imam of our time. How are we going to be able to identify the Imam, and how many practical lessons will we implement? We're looking forward to listening and hearing from you as well, inshallah. Until next time, please do give us permission from Zain Haider Awan and Brother Ali Najaf. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.